I'm Jade, 32, and Christmas at my in-laws should have been perfect. After 5 years with Michael, this was my first holiday as an official family member in their Connecticut mansion. I'd spent weeks choosing thoughtful gifts, hoping to finally earn Eleanor's approval. When the gift exchange began, I watched everyone open beautifully wrapped packages with personalized cards. Then came my turn, nothing. The way my mother-in-law's lips curled into that knowing smirk shattered something inside me. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family. The journey I'm about to share might just help you find your voice too. I grew up in a middle-class family in Michigan, where Christmas meant homemade ornaments and practical gifts wrapped in Sunday comics. My parents divorced when I was 12, and holidays afterward meant splitting time between two homes. Despite the complications, both my parents made sure I felt loved and valued during the holidays. I carried those warm memories into adulthood, hoping to create similar traditions in my own family someday. My career as a high school English teacher brought me immense satisfaction. I loved introducing teenagers to Shakespeare and watching their reluctant interest bloom into genuine appreciation. Literature was my passion, and I spent most evenings grading papers with a cup of tea, perfectly content with my quiet life. Then came the September weekend that changed everything. My college roommate Allison was getting married in Chicago, and I flew in for the celebration. During the reception, I reached for the last bacon-wrapped scallop on a passing tray at exactly the same moment as a tall, dark-haired man in a perfectly tailored suit. "Please, ladies first," he said with a smile that created the most charming dimple in his right cheek. That man was Michael Winters, cousin of the groom, and as I would later learn, heir to the Winters Financial Group fortune. We spent the entire reception talking about everything from classic literature to our shared love of spicy food. By the end of the night, he had my phone number and a promise to call when he was next in Michigan on business. I expected the typical post-wedding ghosting, but Michael called the very next day. 2 weeks later, he flew to see me for our first official date. Our relationship progressed with whirlwind intensity, weekend visits, lengthy phone calls, and eventually 6 months in my first visit to meet his family in Connecticut. The Winters family estate was intimidating to say the least. Set on 5 acres in Greenwich, the colonial mansion boasted 12 bedrooms, a tennis court, and an indoor pool. Michael had warned me his family was comfortable, but nothing prepared me for the level of wealth I encountered. Eleanor Winters, Michael's mother, greeted me with an air kiss and a praising glance that took in my department store dress and sensible heels. "How quaint," she said with a tight smile. "Michael mentioned you were a teacher. So noble to work with children despite the abysmal salary." Michael's father, Walter, was polite but distant, clearly taking his cues from his wife. Their daughter, Natalie, Michael's younger sister, was initially friendly, asking about my work and seeming genuinely interested in my answers. That first visit set the tone for my relationship with the Winters family. Eleanor made subtle comments about my background, my career choice, my clothing always phrased as compliments, but landing like criticisms. Michael seemed oblivious to his mother's barbs, or perhaps he was simply accustomed to them. "Mom's just particular," he explained when I gently brought up her behavior. "She'll warm up to you, I promise." A year after we met, Michael proposed during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. The ring was his grandmother's, a flawless 3-carat diamond in a platinum setting. I was ecstatic, but my joy dimmed slightly when I called my future mother-in-law to share our news. "Well," Eleanor said after a pause that lasted several beats too long, "I suppose Michael knows his own mind. We'll have to plan a suitable engagement party at the club." The wedding planning became a battleground. Eleanor insisted on a lavish ceremony at her country club, dismissing my suggestions for a smaller, more intimate gathering. Michael played peacemaker, usually siding with his mother to keep things simple. "It's easier to let Mum have her way on this," he would say. "It matters more to her than it does to us." By the time our wedding day arrived, I felt like a guest at my own celebration. Eleanor had selected everything from the flowers to the menu, overruling my preferences at every turn. Still, when Michael took my hands and promised to love me forever in front of 300 guests, most of whom I'd never met, I believed we could build our own life separate from his family's influence. How naive I was. After the honeymoon, the pattern of exclusion became more pronounced. During family photos at Thanksgiving, Eleanor positioned me at the edge of every group shot, making it easy to crop me out later. At dinner parties, she introduced everyone by name except me. "And this is Michael's wife," When I spoke, she had a talent for subtly redirecting the conversation, making my contributions seem irrelevant. Our first Christmas as a dating couple, Eleanor gave Michael an expensive watch and me a $50 gift card to a department store I'd never mentioned shopping at. Our second Christmas, now engaged, I received a cashmere sweater 2 sizes too small. When I thanked her anyway, Eleanor said, "Well, it's always good to have goals, dear." Aisha, I tried everything to connect with my mother-in-law. I offered to help with her charity committees. I suggested we take cooking classes together after she mentioned wanting to learn pasta making. I even joined the book club at her country club, despite the other members being decades older and primarily interested in gossip. Nothing worked. The harder I tried, the more Eleanor seemed to resent my efforts. Michael's response to the tension was always the same. "That's just how Mum is. Don't take it personally." But it was impossible not to take personally the constant reminder that I was an outsider, tolerated only because of my husband. Walter, Michael's father, was pleasant but passive. He followed Eleanor's lead in all things, occasionally offering me a sympathetic glance, but never openly contradicting his wife. Natalie initially made efforts to include me, inviting me to lunch or shopping, but gradually she too began to mirror her mother's behaviour, cancelling plans and becoming increasingly distant. As our third Christmas as a married couple approached, I hoped things might finally change. Michael and I had been trying for a baby, and I was now 12 weeks pregnant, past the point where we felt comfortable sharing our news. We had planned to announce it together at Christmas, hoping our child might bridge the gap between Eleanor and me. When Eleanor insisted we spend the holiday at the family home, rather than in our own apartment in the city, I agreed without argument. This would be a fresh start. I would make an extra effort, bring thoughtful gifts, participate enthusiastically in family traditions, and hopefully the news of a grandchild would finally make Eleanor see me as part of the family. I spent weeks selecting the perfect presents. For Walter, a first edition of his favourite mystery author's debut novel. For Natalie, a handcrafted leather portfolio for her new job in publishing. For Eleanor, I went all out a spa weekend at the exclusive retreat she'd mentioned wanting to try, along with a cashmere scarf from her favourite designer. I even baked my grandmother's special cranberry orange cookies to contribute to the holiday spread, carefully packaging them in a festive tin with a handwritten note about sharing family traditions. As we drove to Greenwich on Christmas Eve, Michael reached over and squeezed my hand. "This is going to be a great Christmas," he said, his eyes crinkling with the smile I'd fallen in love with. "I can't wait to see Mom's face when we tell her about the baby." I nodded, pushing down the knot of anxiety in my stomach. "It's going to be perfect," I agreed, wanting so badly to believe it. If only I had known what was waiting for me. The Winters mansion was transformed for Christmas. A 20-foot fir dominated the grand foyer, decorated with antique ornaments and twinkling white lights. Garlands draped every staircase and mantel, punctuated with red velvet bows and sprigs of holly. The scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air, and classical Christmas music played softly from hidden speakers. Eleanor greeted Michael with a warm embrace, then turned to me with significantly less enthusiasm. "Jade, that dress is festive," she said, eyeing my deep green velvet dress with barely concealed disapproval. "Though perhaps a bit snug in the middle, the holidays are so challenging for watching one's figure." I resisted the urge to place a protective hand over my slightly rounded stomach. "Thank you for having us, Eleanor. The house looks beautiful." "Well, presentation has always been important to the Winters family," she replied, the implication clear in her tone. Some traditions, some people were simply more refined than others. I offered the tin of homemade cookies, explaining they were a family recipe. Eleanor took it with 2 fingers, as if it might contaminate her designer outfit. "How rustic! I'll have Maria put these in the kitchen." Maria, I would later learn, was the housekeeper who had worked for the family for 30 years. She appeared silently to take our coats and my humble offering, giving me a kind smile that felt like the first genuine welcome I'd received. Dinner that evening was an elaborate affair, 7 courses of traditional holiday foods served on antique china that Eleanor informed me had belonged to her great-grandmother. I wasn't briefed on the family's dining customs, and accidentally used my salad fork for the fish course, earning a pointed look from Eleanor. "In this house," she explained with exaggerated patience, "we observe proper table etiquette." Michael grew up understanding the importance of such things. Michael, deep in conversation with his father about market trends, didn't notice my discomfort or come to my defense. He was in his element here, easily sliding back into the family dynamics he'd grown up with, leaving me to navigate alone. Throughout dinner, Eleanor regaled us with stories of winter's family traditions, all predating my arrival in Michael's life. The year they spent Christmas in Aspen, the time Michael played Joseph in the country club nativity pageant, the holiday party where 10-year-old Natalie performed a flawless piano recital. Each time I tried to contribute to the conversation, mentioning my own family traditions, or asking questions, Eleanor would subtly redirect, speaking over me, or changing the subject entirely. After dinner came drinks in the study. Walter played bartender, mixing his famous old fashions for everyone except me. When I politely requested one, Eleanor interjected, "Walter, make Jade something non-alcoholic. We wouldn't want to encourage bad habits." I caught a meaningful glance between Eleanor and Natalie. Did they somehow suspect my pregnancy, or was this just another way to mark me as different outside their drinking circle? The evening continued with carols around the grand piano. Eleanor took charge, selecting songs and distributing lyric sheets, conveniently forgetting to include the ones I had mentioned knowing. When I attempted to sing along anyway, she increased the tempo, making it impossible for me to keep up. As midnight approached, Eleanor announced the sleeping arrangements. "Michael, you'll be in your old room, of course. Jade, we've prepared the blue guest room for you." "Separate rooms?" I asked, confused. "It's tradition," Eleanor explained with a thin smile. "No couples share rooms under this roof until they've been married for 5 years. Family rule." Michael shrugged apologetically. "It's just for 2 nights, Jade. No big deal." But it was a big deal. It was yet another arbitrary rule designed to emphasize my outsider status. Michael and I had been sharing a bed for nearly 5 years, married for 3, and suddenly tradition required separation. Alone in the blue guest room, I texted my best friend Sarah. "It's worse than I expected. She's invented a tradition to separate me from Michael at night. Every time I speak, she talks over me. I feel completely unwelcome." Sarah's response was immediate. "This is ridiculous. Stand up for yourself. Michael needs to have your back too. Don't let her treat you like this, especially now that you're pregnant." She was right, of course. But confronting Eleanor in her own home during a holiday she clearly controlled with an iron fist seemed impossible. I resolved to make it through the next day with as much grace as possible, focusing on the pregnancy announcement that would surely change the dynamic. I fell asleep, clutching my still flat stomach, whispering reassurances to my baby that next Christmas would be different. Morning arrived with bright winter sunshine streaming through unfamiliar curtains. Determined to make a good impression, I dressed carefully in a red sweater and black slacks, applied light makeup, and made my way downstairs before 7, hoping to help with breakfast preparations. I found Eleanor already in the kitchen, directing Maria on the placement of pastries on a silver tray. "Good morning," I said brightly. "Can I help with anything?" Eleanor barely glanced my way. "The kitchen is my domain, Jade. We have everything under control. Coffee is in the dining room if you need it." Dismissed again. I retreated to the formal dining room where a buffet of breakfast foods was arranged. I selected a plain bagel and fruit, avoiding the tempting but nausea-inducing smell of the egg casserole. No one commented on my minimal plate, though. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Church service followed breakfast with Eleanor, orchestrating our entrance and seating. Somehow I ended up at the opposite end of the pew from Michael, sandwiched between an elderly couple I'd never met and a distant winter's cousin. Throughout the service, I caught Eleanor watching me with that assessing gaze, as if waiting for me to make a mistake in this performance of family harmony. By the time we returned to the house for the gift exchange, my nerves were frayed, but my excitement was building. Soon we would share our news, and surely a grandchild would change everything. Even Eleanor couldn't exclude her own grandchild or the mother of that child from the family. The elaborate Christmas tree in the main living room was surrounded by beautifully wrapped presents. Eleanor took charge, immediately explaining the family's gift opening procedure as if instructing a child. "In our family, we take turns. Each person distributes all their gifts to the recipients who open them while the giver watches. It's much more civilized than the free-for-all some people do." The implication that my family's Christmas mornings had been uncivilized was clear, but I smiled through it. "That sounds lovely." Walter went first, distributing his gifts with quiet efficiency. Michael received an expensive watch that matched Walter's own. "A winter's man needs a proper timepiece," Walter explained. Natalie got a delicate pearl bracelet. Eleanor unwrapped a diamond pendant that made her clap with delight. I waited, but no package came my way. Walter avoided my gaze as he returned to his seat. Perhaps his gift for me was smaller, easily overlooked, but as everyone admired their new treasures, it became clear I had been deliberately excluded. Natalie went next, handing out monogrammed leather portfolios to her parents and a custom-embroidered golf shirt to Michael. Again, nothing for me. When Michael's turn came, he distributed his gifts somewhat awkwardly. He'd already given me mine that morning, before coming downstairs, a generic silver bracelet that looked hastily purchased. Now I understood why he'd known I would be excluded from the family exchange and had tried to compensate privately. Finally, it was Eleanor's turn. She made a great show of selecting beautifully wrapped packages from under the tree checking tags with exaggerated care. For Walter, my wonderful husband, she announced, presenting him with a rare first edition book he'd been seeking for years. For my darling Natalie, she continued offering a large box that contained a designer coat Natalie had admired in a magazine. And for my son Michael, she finished with a flourish, handing over a small box that held vintage cufflinks that had belonged to his grandfather. The room fell silent as everyone realized I was the only one without a gift from Eleanor. Michael cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mum, did you forget Jade's gift?" he asked, his voice strained but not confrontational. Eleanor's face arranged itself into an expression of mock surprise that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh," she said with that cruel smirk I'd come to dread, "I only shop for family." The silence deepened. Walter suddenly became very interested in his new book. Natalie's cheeks flushed pink with what might have been embarrassment. "Mum, that's not funny," Michael said weakly. Eleanor shrugged, her smile never wavering. "Well, she's only been around for a few years. Who knows if she'll be here next Christmas?" The words hit me like a physical blow. 3 years of marriage, 5 years together, and I was still considered temporary, still not family. All my efforts to connect, to belong, had meant nothing. In that moment, something broke inside me, and something else, something stronger, took its place. I could feel my hands trembling as I slowly rose from my seat on the plush sofa. The weight of every dismissive comment, every exclusion, every subtle slight from the past 5 years pressing down on my shoulders. But I was done carrying that weight. Done accepting the unacceptable. "Thank you, Eleanor," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "You've finally said out loud what you've been communicating through your actions for years." Eleanor's smirk faltered slightly clearly, not expecting me to respond directly to her cruelty. She was used to delivering her barbs without challenge, secure in the knowledge that social politeness and Michael's passivity would protect her from consequences. "I don't know what you mean," she said, adopting an innocent tone that fooled no one. "You're being overly sensitive. It was just a little joke." "It wasn't a joke," I continued, meeting her gaze directly. "It was the truth. You've never considered me family. From the moment Michael introduced us, you've gone out of your way to make me feel unwelcome." I turned slightly to include Walter and Natalie in my address. "You've excluded me from family photos. You've talked over me at every gathering. You've referred to me as Michael's wife rather than using my name. You've criticized my background, my career, my clothing, always with that same smile, always with plausible deniability." Eleanor's face was beginning to redden, but I wasn't finished. "I've spent 5 years trying to connect with you. I've joined your committees, attended your functions, learned your protocols. I've made excuses for your behavior, telling myself you just needed time to accept me. I've swallowed my hurt feelings to keep the peace." I glanced at Michael, who sat frozen in his armchair, his expression a mixture of shock and discomfort. He'd never seen me confront his mother before. I'd always taken his advice to let her comments slide, to not take it personally. "But it stops today," I said firmly, "because this isn't just about me anymore." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath, placing a protective hand over my stomach. This wasn't how we had planned to share our news, but the moment demanded honesty. "I'm pregnant. 12 weeks. That's why I'm not drinking, why I've been careful about what I eat." Michael and I were going to announce it today, hoping it would be a moment of joy for everyone. Michael finally found his voice. "Jade, we were going to tell them together after dinner." "Plans change," I replied, keeping my focus on Eleanor. "Your mother has made it very clear where I stand in this family, and now I need to know where my child will stand. Will you exclude them too, Eleanor? Will you make them feel like an outsider in their own family? Will you give presents to Natalie's children someday, but not to mine?" The colour drained from Eleanor's face. Whatever she had expected from her power play, it wasn't this. "You're pregnant?" Walter asked, speaking up for the first time, genuine surprise in his voice. "Yes," I confirmed. Due in June. Natalie looked down at her hands, a flash of what appeared to be shame crossing her features. She had followed her mother's lead in excluding me, and now the consequences of that choice were becoming clear. Eleanor attempted to regain control of the situation. Well, this is quite the dramatic way to announce a pregnancy. Always needing to be the centre of attention, aren't you? Mom, Michael finally interjected, but his tone was pleading rather than commanding. That's enough. Enough, I echoed, turning to face my husband. Michael, your mother just publicly stated that I'm not family implied our marriage is temporary, and you think saying that's enough addresses the problem. Jade, maybe we should discuss this privately, he suggested, glancing nervously at his parents. We've had 5 years of private discussions, I replied. 5 years of you telling me to be patient, to understand your mother's quirks, to not take her behaviour personally. Where has that gotten us? Eleanor saw an opening and pounced. Michael, surely you can see she's being irrational. Pregnancy hormones, no doubt. In my day, we didn't use our condition as an excuse for rudeness. I almost laughed at the irony of Eleanor lecturing anyone about rudeness. But before I could respond, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. Eleanor, that's enough. Walter's firm tone shocked everyone into silence. In 20 years of marriage to Michael's father, I had never heard him directly contradict his wife. Eleanor turned to him, clearly stunned. Walter, you can't possibly be taking her side. This isn't about sides, he said quietly. But Jade is right. We haven't treated her like family. You have kept her at arm's length from the beginning. And now she's carrying our grandchild. Eleanor's shock quickly transformed into indignation. I don't have to listen to this in my own home, especially not on Christmas. No, you don't, I agreed, suddenly feeling very calm despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. And I don't have to stay where I'm not welcome. I turned to Michael. I'm going to a hotel. You can stay here with your family, since apparently that doesn't include me, or you can come with me. Your choice. Michael looked panicked, his eyes darting between his mother and me. Jade, you're overreacting. Let's just take a breath and enjoy Christmas. We can talk about this later. His response, while not surprising, still stung. Even now, even pregnant with his child, I wasn't his priority. That's what I thought, I said quietly. Merry Christmas, everyone. Thank you for making it crystal clear where I stand. I walked out of the room with as much dignity as I could muster, ignoring Eleanor's huffs of indignation and Michael's calls to wait. In the guest room, I quickly packed my overnight bag, grateful I hadn't fully unpacked the previous night. As I descended the stairs, Natalie appeared in the foyer. Jade, wait, she said, her voice low and urgent. I'll drive you to a hotel. I can call a car, I replied, surprised by her offer. Please, she insisted. Let me do this. Something in her expression, regret perhaps, or a newfound respect, made me nod in agreement. We slipped out the side door to avoid the ongoing drama in the living room, and within minutes we're driving away from the mansion in Natalie's BMW. I'm sorry, she said after we'd travelled in silence for several miles, for going along with Mum's behaviour, for not standing up for you. I stared out the window at the snow-covered landscape, beautiful and cold like the family I'd married into. We used to get along, Natalie. What changed? She sighed heavily. It was easier to follow Mom's lead than fight her. She's relentless when she decides someone doesn't belong. And I was afraid if I allied with you, I'd be on the outside too. The honesty of her admission was refreshing after years of pretense. Your mother is a piece of work, I said, allowing myself the understatement of the century. To my surprise, Natalie laughed. You have no idea, or maybe you do better than most. She pulled up to the Marriott and put the car in park. What will you do now? I placed a hand on my stomach, drawing strength from the tiny life growing inside me. I don't know exactly, but I won't go back to pretending everything is fine when it's not. I can't raise a child in that environment. Natalie nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing today. Someone needed to stand up to her. It's been a long time coming. As I checked into the hotel, my phone buzzed repeatedly with calls from Michael, which I ignored. I needed space to think, to process, to decide what came next. The one call I did answer was from my mother, who listened without judgment as I poured out the whole miserable story. Oh, honey, she said when I finished. I'm so sorry. What a terrible way to spend Christmas. The thing is, Mum, I said, curling up on the hotel bed, I'm not even that upset about the gift. It's what it represents, 5 years of being treated like I don't matter, don't belong. and Michael just lets it happen. Have you thought about what you want to do? I sighed. I love Michael. I'm having his baby, but I can't spend the rest of my life being Eleanor's punching bag, and I can't raise a child in a family where their mother is disrespected. Then you tell him that, my mother said firmly. You make it clear what you need to move forward. And if he can't give you that well, you'll always have a home with me. The security of that unconditional love brought tears to my eyes. Thanks, Mom. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Try to get some rest. But rest proved elusive. As evening fell, a knock at my door announced Michael's arrival. His hair was disheveled, his expression thunderous as he entered the room. What the hell was that? He demanded without preamble. You humiliated my mother in her own home on Christmas. Of all the responses I had expected, this unfiltered anger caught me off guard. Your mother humiliated me by explicitly stating, I'm not family after 5 years of marriage, after I announced my pregnancy, and you're defending her. You shouldn't have announced it that way. We had a plan, Jade, a plan that wouldn't have created this drama. I stared at him in disbelief. The drama was already created when your mother decided to exclude me from Christmas gifts and then publicly declare I'm not family. My pregnancy announcement was a response to her cruelty, not the cause of it. Michael paced the small hotel room, running his hands through his hair in frustration. You don't understand how things work in my family. There are protocols, expectations. Mom is particular about how things are done. Oh, I understand perfectly, I countered. Your mother decides everyone else falls in line, including you, especially you. That's not fair, isn't it? When have you ever stood up to her when she treats me badly? When have you ever put our relationship first? I married you despite her reservations, he exclaimed. Isn't that putting you first? That was 5 years ago, Michael. What have you done since then? Every time she excludes me, criticizes me, undermines me, you say, that's just how she is. Or don't take it personally. You've never once told her to stop. Michael's expression hardened. So what do you want from me? To cut off my family? Is that it? No, I said suddenly, very tired. I want you to stand up for your wife. I want you to establish boundaries with your mother. I want you to make it clear that disrespecting me is not acceptable. She's upset right now, he said, his voice taking on a placating tone that made my skin crawl. You need to apologize for causing a scene and then we can all move forward. I placed a protective hand over my stomach, suddenly seeing with perfect clarity what needed to happen. No, Michael, I will not apologize for finally standing up for myself after years of mistreatment. But I understand now that you will always choose your mother over me, over us, I added, emphasizing my pregnancy. That's not true, he protested, but weakly. It is true, and I can't live like that anymore. I certainly can't raise a child in that dynamic. Michael's eyes widened as he realized where this was heading. What are you saying? I'm saying you have a choice to make. Either you stand up to your mother and establish clear boundaries that protect our family, you, me, and this baby, or what? He challenged. Or our marriage is over. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Michael's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally a sort of desperate calculation. You're hormonal, he said dismissively. You don't mean that. Once you've calmed down... Don't, I interrupted, my voice like steel. Don't you dare blame this on hormones. This has been building for 5 years. The only difference is that now I have more than just myself to protect. Michael stared at me as if seeing a stranger. Perhaps he was. The Jade he knew had been accommodating, eager to please, willing to accept scraps of approval from his family. That Jade was gone. I'm going back to the house, Faye, he said finally. When you're ready to be reasonable, call me. As the door closed behind him, I curled around my stomach, whispering promises to my unborn child. I will never let anyone make you feel less than. I will protect you, even if it means standing alone. We're going to be okay. I spent that night alternating between tears and a strange, calm clarity. By morning, I knew what I needed to do. I checked out of the hotel and took a taxi to the train station, returning to our apartment in the city alone. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a blur of silence from Michael. I called my doctor to confirm my next prenatal appointment, found a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and pregnancy, and began researching what single motherhood might look like if it came to that. On December 30th, an unexpected visitor arrived at our apartment. Walter Winters stood awkwardly in our doorway, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. May I come in? he asked, his usual confidence noticeably diminished. I hesitated, but ultimately stepped aside. Whatever Walter had to say, I was strong enough to hear it. He declined my offer of coffee, sitting stiffly on the edge of our sofa. I owe you an apology, Jade. Many apologies, in fact. This was not what I had expected. For what specifically? For allowing Eleanor to treat you the way she has. For not stepping in sooner. For my own complicity in making you feel unwelcome in our family. I sat across from him, waiting for him to continue. Eleanor is difficult, he said carefully. She comes from a family where appearances were everything, and emotional warmth was considered a weakness. Her own mother was even more formidable than she is, if you can imagine that. That explains her behavior, I acknowledged, but it doesn't excuse it. No, it doesn't. Walter agreed, surprising me again. I've enabled her for our entire marriage, keeping the peace at all costs. It seemed easier than confronting the problems. But watching her treatment of you, seeing how it's affected Michael, affected all of us. I realize now that my silence has done more harm than good. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope, placing it on the coffee table between us. This isn't a solution, but it might help if you need options. I didn't touch the envelope, guessing it contained a check. I don't want your money, Walter. I want respect. I want acknowledgement of my place in this family. I want my child to grow up in a healthy environment. Walter nodded slowly. I understand, and I want you to know that I've spoken with Eleanor. Really spoken with her, perhaps for the first time in years. She's processing what happened, what she's done. And Michael, I asked the question that mattered most. Walter sighed heavily. Michael is struggling. He loves you, Jade, but he's been caught in his mother's web his entire life. It's not easy to break free of patterns established in childhood. I know, I said softly, but he has to try. For us. For our baby. Give him time, Walter suggested, rising to leave, and know that whatever happens, you will always be family to me. You and my grandchild. After Walter left, I sat for a long time staring at the untouched envelope. Finally, I picked it up and placed it in a drawer unopened. This wasn't about money. It never had been. New Year's Eve came and went without word from Michael. I fell asleep before midnight, exhausted by pregnancy and emotional turmoil, waking in the new year alone in our bed. The following afternoon, I heard his key in the lock. Michael entered cautiously, looking as if he hadn't slept properly in days. He carried a small suitcase. He'd clearly been staying at his parents' house since Christmas. Can we talk? He asked, his voice rough with fatigue. I nodded, gesturing to the living room where Walter had sat just days before. Michael placed his suitcase by the door and followed me, perching uncertainly on the edge of the armchair, as if unsure of his welcome in his own home. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he began, about what happened at Christmas, about what you said. I waited, giving him space to continue without prompting. I called a therapist. He said the admission clearly difficult for him. I've had 2 sessions already, emergency appointments. We've been talking about family dynamics, about patterns of behavior I never really questioned before. This was unexpected. Michael had always dismissed therapy as unnecessary when I'd suggested it in the past. What made you decide to go? I asked. Losing you, he said simply. The thought of raising our child in separate homes because I couldn't stand up to my mother, it was unacceptable. A tiny spark of hope flickered to life inside me, but I tempered it with caution. One therapy session doesn't change lifelong patterns, Michael. I know, he acknowledged. This is just the beginning, but I want you to know I'm committed to doing the work, to being the husband you deserve, the father our child needs. And what about Eleanor? I asked the critical question. Michael's expression hardened slightly. I've spoken to her, made it clear that her treatment of you ends now. That if she wants to be part of our lives, my life, your life, our child's life, she needs to acknowledge the harm she's caused and make genuine amends. How did she take that? Not well, he admitted with a grimace. There were tears, accusations, the usual manipulation tactics. But for the first time, I didn't back down. I told her this wasn't negotiable, that I love her, but I love you too, and I won't allow her to force me to choose between you anymore. The spark of hope grew stronger, but I remained cautious. Words are easy, Michael. We've had this conversation before and nothing changed. I know, he said, reaching for my hand. I allowed the contact feeling, the familiar warmth of his skin against mine. That's why I'm not asking you to trust me right away. I'm asking for a chance to prove that things will be different. To show you through actions, not just words, that I'm committed to change. I considered his request carefully. Despite everything, I still loved him, and our child deserved a chance to have both parents together if possible. What would that look like? I asked. This chance. Couples therapy, he suggested immediately. Individual therapy for both of us. Clear boundaries with my mother enforced consistently. And time for me to demonstrate that this isn't just a temporary reaction to an ultimatum, but a genuine commitment to change. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Okay, I said finally. We can try. But Michael, I need you to understand something. What's that? I won't go back to the way things were. I can't. If you slip back into old patterns, if you allow your mother to disrespect me again, I will leave, and this time it will be permanent. He nodded solemnly. I understand, and I won't let that happen. As Michael unpacked his suitcase and settled back into our apartment, I knew we had a long road ahead. Trust once broken is not easily repaired, but for the first time in years, I felt like we might be walking that road together, instead of me trudging along alone while Michael remained safely on the sidelines. That night, as we lay in bed together for the first time since Christmas, Michael placed his hand gently on my stomach. I'm sorry, he whispered in the darkness. To both of you. I promise to do better. I covered his hand with mine, hoping with all my heart that this time his promise would hold. January passed in a blur of therapy appointments, work commitments, and cautious rebuilding of trust. Michael attended every prenatal checkup, downloaded pregnancy apps to track our baby's development, and for the first time in our relationship truly listened when I expressed concerns about his family. Couples therapy was challenging but illuminating. Our therapist, Dr. Chen, didn't hesitate to call out unhealthy patterns in our relationship. Michael, she said during our third session, when your mother criticizes Jade and you remain silent, what message does that send? He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. That I agree with her, or at least that I think her behavior is acceptable. And is it acceptable to you? No, he said firmly. It never was. It was easier to ignore it than confront it. Easier for whom? Dr. Chen pressed in. Michael's eyes met mine, realization dawning. Easier for me, not for Jade. These moments of clarity were coming more frequently as Michael continued his individual therapy alongside our couples sessions. He was learning to recognize the dysfunctional patterns that had shaped his childhood and continued to influence our marriage. Meanwhile, Eleanor had not taken Michael's ultimatum well. After her initial tearful reaction, she moved to more familiar tactics: guilt, manipulation, and when those failed, icy silence. She called Michael with emergencies that inevitably turned out to be minor issues, sent passive-aggressive texts about being abandoned by her son, and when those approaches didn't work, claimed various health concerns that required his immediate attention. To my surprise and relief, Michael held firm. He responded to genuine issues but refused to be manipulated by false emergencies. He visited his parents occasionally, but always with clear time boundaries. And most importantly, he consistently reinforced that his relationship with me was non-negotiable. Natalie became an unexpected ally during this time. Having witnessed the Christmas confrontation and its aftermath, she seemed to find her own courage to establish boundaries with Eleanor. She began calling me directly to check on the pregnancy, even meeting me for lunch occasionally, without Michael present. Mom's seeing a therapist, she confided during one of these lunches in early February. Dad insisted, said it was either that or accept that her relationships with her children would be permanently damaged. How's that going? I asked, genuinely curious. Natalie shrugged. Hard to tell. She goes to the appointments, but she doesn't talk about them, though she has been a bit less intense lately. Valentine's Day brought the first major test of our new boundaries. Michael had planned a romantic dinner at my favorite restaurant, arranging for flowers and a special dessert to celebrate both the holiday and the halfway point of my pregnancy. We were just finishing our main course when a commotion at the front of the restaurant caught our attention. Eleanor Winters, impeccably dressed as always, was arguing with the maitre d'. My son is dining here, she insisted loudly. It's an emergency. I need to speak with him immediately. Michael's face registered shock, then determination as he stood. I'll handle this, he said, squeezing my hand reassuringly. I watched as he approached his mother, speaking to her in low, firm tones that didn't carry to our table. Eleanor's expression cycled through relief at seeing him, then indignation as he continued speaking. She attempted to move past him toward our table, but Michael gently blocked her path, shaking his head. After a few more exchanges, he guided her toward the door, his hand firm on her elbow. Through the restaurant window, I could see them continuing their conversation outside, Eleanor gesticulating dramatically while Michael remained calm but resolute. When he returned 10 minutes later, his expression was strained but composed. "I'm so sorry about that," he said, taking his seat across from me. "She claimed Dad had fallen and might have broken his hip. When I called him from outside, he was fine watching a basketball game in perfect health." "What did you tell her?" "That her behavior was unacceptable, that fabricating emergencies to interrupt our evening was manipulative and would not be tolerated. That if she pulls something like this again, we'll be taking a complete break from contact until she can respect our boundaries." I reached across the table to take his hand. "Thank you. Don't thank me for doing what I should have done years ago," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "But I promise you, Jade, things really are changing. I'm changing." That night marked a turning point in our relationship. For the first time, I truly believed Michael was capable of standing up to his mother, of putting our family first. The road ahead would still be challenging, but we were facing it together. As Valentine's Day faded into memory, Eleanor's behavior shifted once again. The fake emergencies stopped. The guilt trips became less frequent. And eventually, in early March, she requested a meeting with both of us. "Are you ready for this?" Michael asked. As we drove to the neutral location, we'd agreed upon a private dining room at a restaurant halfway between our apartment and his parents' home. I placed a hand on my now visible baby bump. As ready as I'll ever be. Walter and Natalie were already seated when we arrived with Eleanor, positioned between them as if they were bodyguards or perhaps restraints. The tension in the room was palpable as Michael held my chair, his hand lingering supportively on my shoulder before he took his own seat. Eleanor cleared her throat. "Thank you for coming," she began formally. "I've asked for this meeting because we need to clear the air." "Can?" I nodded but remained silent, waiting to see where this was heading. "The events at Christmas were unfortunate," she continued, choosing her words carefully. "I realize my behavior was hurtful, and I'm sorry you felt excluded from the family." I recognized the non-apology immediately. I didn't feel excluded, Eleanor. I was explicitly told I wasn't family. There's a difference. Eleanor's lips tightened momentarily before she regained her composure. "Yes, well, I said things in the heat of the moment that were inappropriate. I apologize for that. It wasn't the heartfelt acknowledgement I might have hoped for, but coming from Eleanor, it was significant progress. Still, I needed more clarity." "I appreciate your apology," I said carefully, "but I need to understand what changes can we expect going forward, because I won't subject myself or my child to the kind of treatment I've experienced these past 5 years." Us." Eleanor looked to Walter as if seeking rescue, but he simply nodded encouragingly. She turned back to me with visible effort. "I am working on my behavior." She said the words clearly difficult for her. "My therapist says I have control issues and difficulty accepting change, particularly changes to my family structure." Michael reached under the table to squeeze my hand supportively. "What I'm trying to say," Eleanor continued with uncharacteristic awkwardness, "is that I want to be part of my grandchild's life. And to do that, I understand I need to adjust my expectations and behavior." It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a start, a crack in the perfectly controlled facade that Eleanor had maintained for as long as I'd known her. "I appreciate your honesty," I said, "and I want our child to know their grandmother, but that can only happen in a healthy, respectful environment." "I understand," Eleanor said stiffly. Michael spoke up, then his voice gentle but firm. "Mum, we're willing to move forward, but we need specific commitments from you. No more excluding Jade from family events or traditions. No more subtle digs or criticisms. No more emergency interruptions or manipulation tactics." Eleanor nodded reluctantly. "And most importantly," he continued, "I need you to understand that Jade and our child are my primary family now. I love you, but I won't tolerate anything that undermines my marriage or my wife's well-being." Eleanor's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she nodded again. "I understand." The rest of the meeting proceeded with cautious civility. We discussed practical matters, the upcoming baby shower that Natalie had offered to host preparations for the nursery plans for after the birth. Eleanor contributed tentatively at first, then with growing enthusiasm as it became clear her input was welcome, as long as it wasn't delivered as a command. As we prepared to leave, Eleanor approached me somewhat hesitantly. "Jade, I understand if you need time to trust that my intentions are genuine, but I hope we might start fresh, for the baby's sake." "I'd like that," I said sincerely. "One step at a time." The drive home was quiet, both Michael and I processing the meeting in our own ways. Finally, he broke the silence. "Are you okay?" I considered the question carefully. "I think so. It wasn't the complete acknowledgement I might have hoped for, but it was more than I expected from Eleanor." "She's trying," Michael said. "In her own way. It's not easy for her to admit she's wrong about anything." "I know, and I'm willing to meet her halfway as long as the basic boundaries are respected." Michael reached for my hand. "Thank you for giving her another chance, for giving us another chance." I smiled, feeling cautiously optimistic. Our family is worth fighting for. The weeks that followed brought a gradual thawing in relations with the Winters family. Eleanor called occasionally, always asking politely about my health and the pregnancy before speaking with Michael. She sent thoughtful gifts for the baby, a silver rattle that had been Michael's, a handmade blanket she'd commissioned from a local artisan, books for the nursery library. At our 20-week appointment, we learned we were having a girl. Michael's eyes filled with tears as the ultrasound technician pointed out our daughter's perfect profile, her tiny hands, her beating heart. "She's beautiful," he whispered, squeezing my hand. "Just like her mother," the technician agreed with a smile. When we shared the news with the family, Eleanor's response surprised me. Instead of the controlling suggestions I'd expected about names or nursery themes, she simply said, "A granddaughter. How wonderful. I look forward to getting to know her on your terms, of course." It was a small thing, that acknowledgement of our authority as parents, but it meant everything. The baby shower in May was another milestone. Hosted by Natalie at a restaurant near our apartment, it brought together my friends, my mother and the Winters family in a celebration that miraculously went smoothly. Eleanor was on her best behaviour, complimenting my friends, engaging with my mother in genuine conversation, and referring to me as Jade or Michael's wife, rather than some vague designation. As the shower wound down, Eleanor approached me with an elegantly wrapped package. "This is just from me to you," she said quietly. "Not for the baby." Inside was a first edition of Jane Eyre, my favourite novel, something I'd mentioned once in passing years ago. The thoughtfulness of the gift, the fact that she'd remembered this detail about me, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "This means a lot to me." Eleanor nodded, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her normally composed features. "I'm trying, Jade. I know I have a long way to go, but I am trying." "I know," I replied. "So am I." As spring turned to summer and my pregnancy progressed, the cautious détente with Eleanor evolved into something approaching genuine rapport. She still had moments of overstepping, of trying to control situations, but now Michael consistently enforced our boundaries, and Eleanor remarkably respected them. Walter seemed reinvigorated by these changes, engaging more actively with Michael and showing genuine interest in my work and well-being. Natalie and I grew closer, our shared experience with Eleanor creating a bond that might never have formed otherwise. By the time my due date approached in late June, the Winters family had transformed in ways I could never have imagined that fateful Christmas morning. Not perfect, still working through decades of dysfunctional patterns, but committed to change in a way that gave me hope for our daughter's future. Emma Grace Winters arrived 1 week before Christmas, pink and perfect, and loudly announcing her presence to the world. Michael was by my side throughout the exhausting 18-hour labour, supporting me, advocating for me, with medical staff being the partner I'd always needed him to be. When Eleanor arrived at the hospital the following day, her arms full of flowers, her normally perfect composure, slightly dishevelled in her haste to meet her granddaughter, I felt none of the apprehension I'd expected. Instead, I found myself genuinely happy to share this moment with her. "Would you like to hold her?" I offered, watching as Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "May I?" She asked the request for permission rather than the assumption of right, another small but significant change. Michael carefully transferred our daughter from my arms to his mother's. Eleanor gazed down at Emma with naked adoration, all pretense and control momentarily abandoned. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I'm your grandmother, and I've been waiting so long to meet you." She looked up at me, then her expression more open and vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. "She's perfect, Jade. Thank you for bringing her into our family, for not giving up on us even when we made it difficult." "She is perfect," I agreed, watching my daughter in her grandmother's arms. "And she deserves a family that loves and respects each other. All of us." Eleanor nodded, understanding the gentle reminder. "We're learning. Some of us more slowly than others." she added with a self-deprecating smile that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. As I watched Michael join his mother, both of them gazing adoringly at Emma, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The painful Christmas confrontation that had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning, the start of a difficult but necessary transformation for all of us. Our first Christmas with Emma was spent at the Winters mansion, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different from the previous year. My stocking hung alongside the others on the mantel. My preferences were considered in the menu planning. My family traditions were incorporated into the celebrations. Most importantly, when Eleanor distributed gifts on Christmas morning, mine was among them, a beautiful cashmere sweater in exactly my size, with a card that simply read, "For my daughter-in-law with love and gratitude." As I watched Emma, barely 5 days old, sleeping peacefully in her bassinet beside the Christmas tree, surrounded by family who had learned the hard way what truly matters, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks along the way, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But through therapy, through honest communication, through consistent boundaries, we had created something new and healthy from the broken pieces of the past. Eleanor was still Eleanor, perfectionist, particular, prone to wanting things her way, but she had learned to express those preferences as suggestions rather than commands, to respect our decisions, as parents to treat me as an equal member of the family rather than an intruder. Michael had found his voice, learning to stand firm with his mother while still maintaining a loving relationship with her. Our marriage had emerged stronger for having weathered the crisis built now on mutual respect and clear boundaries rather than conflict avoidance. And I had learned that sometimes walking away is necessary to find your way back. That standing up for yourself isn't selfish, but essential. That family isn't defined by blood or tradition, but by love and respect freely given. As Michael joined me by the bassinet, slipping his arm around my waist and pressing a kiss to my temple, I felt profound gratitude for the painful awakening that had led us here. "Merry Christmas," he whispered. "Merry Christmas," I replied, leaning into his embrace. The first of many. Have you ever had to set firm boundaries with family members to protect yourself or your children? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Each family dynamic is unique, but we can learn so much from sharing our stories. Don't forget to like this video if you found it helpful, subscribe for more real-life stories about family relationships, and share with someone who might need to hear that standing up for themselves is not just okay, it's sometimes necessary for healing. Thank you for being part of this journey, and remember, true family is built on respect, not just shared DNA.